Welcome to the second lesson in the Introduction to Valuations chapter on the difference between implicit and comparative valuation techniques. Let's first take a look at comparative valuations. This essentially refers to the process of determining the value of an asset by looking at a similar asset. Consider a homeowner that wants a rough estimate of the value of his home. He realizes that many homes in his development are incredibly similar. He remembers hearing that his neighbor across the street had recently refinanced her house and it was valued at $800,000. The initial homeowner thinks his house is very similar to his neighbor's and concludes that his house is also worth $800,000. He just completed a comparative valuation, which gave him an idea of his house's value. The one concept missing here is adjustments. Sometimes two assets are very similar, except for a few measurable differences. Back to our homeowner. Assume he remembers his neighbor boasting about having an extra bathroom next to her kitchen. The homeowner knows that this would increase the appraised value of his neighbor's house. As a result, the initial homeowner reasonably adjusts the valuation of his house down to $790,000 to take into account his lack of a kitchen bathroom. The homeowner's comparison to his neighbor's house and his logical adjustments can all be applied to businesses. Investment banks use two types of comparative valuation techniques to apply the same logic of the homeowner to firms. We'll cover both a comparable company analysis and a precedent transaction analysis in future modules. For now, let's move on to intrinsic valuations. Think of an intrinsic valuation as a true value or true price. Intrinsic value is also considered an asset's fundamental value. Intrinsic value captures the value of an asset purely based on the cash it will produce throughout its life. Let's step back for a second and consider our homeowner from the previous slide. Assume he had no ability to ask his neighbors or find the price of similar homes in the area. How would he be able to value his home? He would need to look at the potential cash his home could produce in the future. This concept is a little tricky to grasp, but let's walk through it. Okay, so he's not sure about how much he could realistically sell the property for. But what if he could reasonably assume that he could rent out the property for some amount of cash, say $3,000, for a long period of time out into the future? This rental income, even if it's purely theoretical, is known as a cash flow, and we'll talk a lot more about cash flows in future modules. For now, it's important to understand that we can use specific mathematical models to find out the home's value today implied by this potential future group of rental payments made to the homeowner, basically the future economic benefit the home has. Again, the same idea can be applied to businesses and net income. We can determine how much cash a business will produce in the future to come up with an idea of its value today. This process is known as a discounted cash flow analysis, or a DCF. A DCF is one of the most fundamental analyses in all of finance. It's okay if this concept is a bit unclear. We will address it again in detail very shortly. Another common intrinsic valuation method is a dividend discount model. It tries to find the true value of a company's stock based on how much money it will distribute to its shareholders in the future. Bankers use DCFs much more commonly than DDMs, so we'll discuss discounted cash flow analyses in Module 6, but we won't talk too much more about dividend discount models. It's really important to bring these two concepts together. That is, comparative and intrinsic valuation methods both find the present value of an asset. A present value, sometimes referred to as PV, is the theoretical value of an asset right at the present moment. It's vital to remember that this value will almost always differ from the market price, or price observable in the open market. In banking and in finance more broadly, finding the present value of an asset is critical and crucial to generating income. Coming up next, we'll talk specifically about terms used to describe a company's value. It's time to start getting into the basics we'll need to understand to discuss actual valuation methods. We'll introduce enterprise value and other core financial concepts used to describe the performance of a business in quantitative terms.